Okay, let's move over now to the mixer, because the mixer is really where all the technological changes have really come over the last few years. Now, the digital mixers particularly have changed the world. And who would have known that this, right, this is a mixer. I'll just put that little thing up there because that's an aerial. That is a 12-channel mixer. It has 4 microphones here, 4 microphone inputs, or lines, because you can plug jacks in. And it also has another 8 that you can plug things into, and of course a couple of outputs. You can put this on the floor, plug it into power, and then take 2 cables and plug it into powered speakers, and you've got a PA. That's it. And that's exactly what we're doing tonight. That there is a rack with this mixer in the bottom, and I've got 2 wireless receivers there as well, which we're not using at the moment. Normally we would in presentation. So this rack though is only there for the convenience of carrying all those bits and pieces. You could just use that on its own. And I will have a look at this, how you control this in a moment. But then let's firstly move up to some of the larger devices. By the way, most people that look at a mixer the first time, which has got knobs on it, right, lots of them, are quite daunted for the first time. There's no difference between those mixers and something like that. The difference is how you control it. And that's what we'll show you in a second. Because you can control that from anywhere within reason, anywhere in the room, so that you can actually then listen to the sound that you want to hear from the audience's point of view, not trying to guess what it sounds like down the back. Okay, so I'm now going to wander all the way over the other side, so I'll get the cameraman to follow me here. This, by the way, is one of those wireless microphones, which is going into that. It's working. You know, at the end of the night, you can come up and have a bit of a play with these things. Right, moving over then from that there, we then move into a larger mixer. I don't need that anymore. This one, right, yes, it's a bit larger. It's still only that high, and it goes into a rack, of course. That's 32 channels. 24 in the front, another 8 at the back, and it's also got 8 channels, or 12 channels, no, 16 channel outputs. You can take outputs to all sorts of things, not just the speakers. And I should mention too that most digital mixers, this one has the same, it's got a USB port on the back, which happens to be covered up by a label at the moment, so that you can plug this into a computer and record every input to a separate track on just about any digital audio workstation software, from GarageBand, Mixcraft, right through to Studio One, Pro Tools, you name it. Quite separate from the live sound. Doesn't affect the live sound. So in the old days, you had to have a live system, and then you would split all of those inputs to another cable, and you would go off somewhere in an outside broadcast band or something trying to record it. Now it can all be done in the one device. That little mixer that I showed you before has got a USB recorder built in. You put in a USB thumb drive, and that will record stereo just directly from it. And when you look at the control, it comes up like a little cassette player. Weird. No, most people these days don't know what a cassette player is. So, quite interesting. Now, that is another digital mixer in a rack. And then, and I'll try and get this in a position that you can see, this is the same brand of digital mixer. Right, this is 16 channel. You can get, it's exactly the same as that inside, except that this now has all of the tactile controls. So you can use this like you would an analog mixer. Right? You need to get your head around the concept, but once you do, it's so much simpler, because what you'll find in all of these is so much more than what you can fit in an analog mixer. I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is when you want to be able to control it. Tactile, you can see knobs and buttons and everything, and a big screen here that highlights what's going on. You can still operate it though from anywhere else wirelessly with an iPad or a computer or anything else similar to that, even a phone. You can't see a lot on a phone, but it does work, right? But it is possible though to have someone on stage who just wants to control one volume or two with their phone. They don't need to control everything. They can just control their own level, for example, or what they're hearing back if you've got foldback speakers. So that is basically that in a different format. So, and then we would fit this in a case like this over here. If you can see those rack strips there, that is a rack case, the same as these, except that this has rack ears that fit on the side and it screws in so that it then pops up and you can use it, and the other electronics go down the bottom. And we'll move on to that in a moment. And I will let you have a look at the software because that's going to be important. Now, just for comparison, this is an analog mixer. You probably say, well, what's the difference? Analog mixer, everything is what you see is what you get. And without going through trying to explain all the knobs here, essentially that there is a channel strip and you've just got lots of them. Right, so what you are doing here is exactly the same as you do on a digital mixer, but everything that you can do on this mixer you can see on the front panel. In other words, you can say the level, and then you've got EQ and you've got some sends. I won't go into all of that technical stuff here. And then over here you've got your master outputs. Now what's different about this, it's a hybrid, right, which also has some digital components, and you can actually record into a USB so that you get full multi-track recording from all of the inputs and outputs and so on. And it's got some effects, right? These are there's not a lot of difference in cost between these and digital. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So let me move back just for a moment before we look at what's in the rack to something like this that I was using before. Right, this is the baby. This is under $500, for example, 12 channels, and then one here, same as this, in this rack is 16 channels. Right, roughly double the cost to go from this up to that. But if you had to look, if this was an analog mixer, right, with buttons and so on, besides the fact that you need a bigger space for the buttons and the knobs, right, if you knew what was in here, you would need a rack at least 5 times the size of that with the electronics that's in it. Every channel in here, besides the same controls that you saw on the analog mixer, also have very elaborate equalizers, parametric and graphic. It has compressors, it has limiters, it has effects for every channel. So you work out all those devices that you would have to have, not to mention all the cables that you would probably use, an awful mess, right? And that's why the digital mixer is so much more powerful, besides how you operate it, right? It's just so much more powerful what you can fit in there. So that hopefully makes sense to why you should, in our opinion, move to the digital if at all possible, or you've got some religious reason not to. All right, simple as that. Okay, I don't know if you can get down to this, can you, Dave? Yeah. This is a typical mobile rack setup, and I'll go through this because this rack happens to be what we call 10 units high. A unit is the width of, see that wireless microphone there? That's 1 unit, right? It's a standard, industry standard. So this happens to have 10 spaces in it that you can put things into, and you can make the racks smaller or bigger to suit yourself. It's mobile because it's not what we call portable. It's not something you're just going to pick up and go down the stairs with it, but it's easy to move around, and 2 students can certainly pick this up and take it over a step or 2. I don't recommend you carry it up a lot of stairs, not a lot of fun. So what's in here is, in this case, a 16 channel mixer that you had, a bigger version of that. So it's got 16 ins and outs, 16 inputs, and it's also got now more outputs, 8 outputs. Why so many outputs? Well, firstly, the main outputs as we have them would normally go to your speaker systems or your amplifiers or whatever. In this case, we have an amplifier down the bottom, because that's where the output of this mixer is going to inside, and then the speakers would plug into that amplifier, passive speakers, because they don't need the amplifier, they're here. And that is a 1,000 watt amplifier, so that would be very good for a gym system. In fact, that's where this one's going. But you've also got all these other outputs here, which are, if you like, similar to the ones that are going out the speakers, can go to other speakers, such as speakers to come back for foldback, so you can hear what you're doing at a separate level with a separate mix in it. So what you hear through the main speakers can be quite different to what's coming back through any other pair of speakers. And you might have other speakers in the hall, so you might have multiple speakers, you might have delays on them if it's a huge hall, right? So the first lot go to the speakers live from the stage, the next one is delayed slightly because they're further back and so on, right? That's all possible because you've got all those multiple outputs. when you see the application of how to control it, hopefully this will be a lot simpler. Okay, under that we have in this case 2 wireless receivers. And I will talk about wireless mics just at the end because that's important things. These are 2 wireless receivers. They happen to be plugged into 1 and 2 on the mixer. Right, so the wires come out the back and straight into the front. So channels 1 and 2 are set up for those wireless microphones. In this particular case, this series can have up to 12. So you could have 12 wireless microphones in there. You might need a bit more space in the rack for that, right, obviously. So that's just a blank panel there. That's room for other things that you might want to put. A drawer, very important to have a drawer in the rack where you put your wireless mics and your other bits and pieces, right? You don't want to be lugging a bag around with all those bits and pieces. And then finally, the power amp. Now, around the back, and this is when we haven't tidied up the wire in this purposely, we just left it all as it is, right? All of the things in there you shouldn't have to touch at all. But on the back panel, right, we've got the power supplies here for the wireless mics. We've got the power supply here going to the power amp. This happens to be the power cord for the whole rack. And so you just plug that in and you're ready to go. And you've got more power here for other things. So you haven't got to worry about all the other cables and bits and pieces on the stage. Very, very convenient. And you can add more to that. So in a sense, you've only got, in this case, to plug in 3 wires and you've got the system. You've got one for the power and you've got one cable that plugs into the back of the power amp there and runs to a speaker, and the other one goes to the other speaker. Or if you're in a gym or installed, you have the 2 cables for the speakers that plug into a wall panel. And that's it. Do you think that's cool? Yeah, it really is. I wish they had them around when I was playing in bands and all that. We had to lug all that gear around. Okay, just a very quick look. By the way, that rack is the same except that it's got the pop-up top, right, so that you can have one with controls on it, whether it's an analog mixer or digital. But the concept is exactly the same, and it's got the power board at the back there. Right, let's have a quick look at the mixer. So if this mixer here, you can see on site, this is on my laptop. I'm connected wirelessly to down the back, right? Because this particular mixer is the one that I'm operating in this box here. So you'll see here that we've got, in this case, we've got an EDnet cable, network cable, that goes down to the back to a wireless router, and then I'm connected to the wireless router. If this was in a school, you can connect that to the school network and operate it from anywhere in the school network. If the principal wants to muck up your mix, he can. From his office and not even hear it. Right? Of course, in this case, we can also not use that, and we can instead use the built-in wireless, right, which is also very good. The only caution that I say about inbuilt wireless is make sure you are reasonably close to here, because if this is low down on the floor, like it can be, and you're way down the back of a hall and you've got 500 people in front of you, it might be dropping in and out a bit. Not a good idea. Right, so it's better in that situation to either get a cable to a router up high, where you've got an aerial or something like that, or connect it through one cable, and it's pretty simple cable. You haven't got multi-cores and all the other things that you've got to worry about. So if I have a look at this, and I notice that you can see that green flashing lights there, right, that's probably the background noise, is it? Yep. So for example, I've got a touch screen on my computer, by the way, so I could just turn that up. Or I can unmute, which I've just done, and I should have not done that because I should have turned this on first. And now this is unmuted but not turned up. Or it is turned up. Oh, you must have done it. Dave beat me to it. So this is my microphone here. Okay? And of course this channel, right, goes over to the master output. In this case, the main left and right up here, and that's the master fader there. And it's quite low, as you can hear, right? I'm talking very quietly. Now, people online probably can't hear the difference here. But if I just clicked on here, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but just so that you get an idea, we're looking at the whole mixer here with all of these channels. And I'll stop talking on this. I'll just mute that so we don't have a problem. Now, if I then click on, say, the next one along, the channel, I can see everything about that channel. So that channel has got, I can set the input level, like the gain sometimes that you have on a mixer. I can change a noise gate. Now noise gate, without getting technical, it means that it has to be a certain level before the gate opens. So if you're in a noisy place, say it's a lot of background noise, I can adjust that gate so that nothing happens with that background noise. It will not open the mic. You don't hear it through the PA until I talk louder through the mic, and then the gate opens. So you'll hear me and the background noise, but hopefully I'm louder. And then when I stop talking, the background noise disappears. Right, so that's what a gate is. Equalizer, I won't go through all that. Compressor, it compresses the dynamics. And also you've got auxiliary sends and so on. If we look at the input only, I can look at that in detail. I can look at the gate in detail, the equalizer, I can move things around on the screen. Compressor, I can control, sends, right? There's just so much that you can do in there just by paging through to the right place on that channel very, very quickly. But here's the best part, right? You might say, well, yeah, that's great, we can do all that. The best part is that every setting in here you can save, unlimited numbers. So therefore, if you have an assembly, you go up here and you simply save that as a file. Next time you have an assembly, you say, load it. All the settings go back. And whereas if you have a kid over there who's just got to your mixer and moved every knob and button on it, you are going to have a disaster to fix, right? This, you just say, no worries, load, done. So you can have the choir, you can have the band, you can have the sports day, you can have the assembly. All those as saved settings, and kids love that. You can also password protect it. So that's all good too, right? Oh, the other thing, yeah, about that recorder, I just thought I'd let you see that. Where is it? Just there. This, I love this. Brings up a little cassette deck. And of course, when kids do this, they say, what's that? Cassette deck. So I could, for example, these are all the pieces of music that happen to be on that USB stick. It's sticking out the front. Right, there's a little tiny USB thumb drive. All WAV files, these are, not MP3s, they're WAV files, so they're even better quality. You just go down and select what you want and then hit the play button. And then that's controlled by, in this case, those two channels, but you can put them on any channels, of course. So, and also you can record. If you want to record what's happening in the mix, you just hit the record button. So I think that's very cool.